Welcome to the Lemons and Pineapples podcast. I'm your host, Emma O'Brien, personal development coach, heart math practitioner, dog photographer, and entrepreneur. In this podcast, I share tools, strategies, and amazing guest interviews to help you improve your mindset and your well-being with a sprinkle of fun and probably some mention of dogs along the way. So without further ado, let's squeeze the day. Before we jump into today's episode, I'm looking for a handful of people who can beta test a new coaching package I'm offering. I work with people who are stuck in their lives or careers and would like support in making changes, as well as people who battle with the effects of stress and anxiety. If you feel you would benefit from some coaching, which I'm going to offer at a 50% discount for my beta testers, please send me a DM on Instagram at Emma O'Brien Coach and we can arrange a time to chat. Hi folks, welcome to episode 13 of the podcast. Today my guest is Taylor Durrett and we are going to talk about high functioning anxiety, something I can certainly relate to, and we're going to be talking about how it shows up in your life and why it might not always be a bad thing to have. First, let me tell you a little bit about Taylor. Having over 15 years of experience as a therapist and an emotional eating coach, Taylor has a deep understanding of her clients' desires for change and personal growth. She supports them on their journeys towards unlocking their full potential, and she focuses on cognitive behavioral change, giving her clients the tools and skills they need to feel empowered and know that the change they are looking for is within their reach. Welcome to the podcast, Taylor.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This is going to be a very interesting conversation, because I think, like I said, I can relate to the high functioning anxiety piece. I think you can as well.
I certainly can.
So from your point of view as a therapist and someone who's been working in this space for a long time, what exactly is high functioning anxiety and how would you kind of give a definition of that?
So I start by saying not everyone is the same. This isn't therapy. I've not met anyone. I always give the disclaimer, but I'll speak in general terms. High functioning anxiety is a subcategory of anxiety disorders or anxiety in general. What is interesting about high functioning anxiety is the way that it presents. These people tend to tackle it head on rather than kind of retreating from it. And so what we present as with high functioning anxiety is a high achieving, driven, confident, outgoing person that excels. A lot of these people are fantastic at what they do for a living. They look like they've got their crap together. Everyone kind of looks at them and admires them and thinks, oh my gosh, they juggle so many balls. They do it with such grace. So how do they have it all together? But right underneath that surface is a person that is overthinking. They're a little bit perfectionistic. They fear failure. They have poor boundaries with others. Oftentimes they're saying yes, 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 even when they don't have the capacity for it. And they have a lot of self-doubt often, and oftentimes very self-critical. They're often comparing themselves to everyone else. They don't feel good enough. And so it's this dueling reality that they're living in, because how they present and how they go home and feel at night are two very different things.
Yeah, and you're talking about that, and I'm going, yep, I can relate to that. Yep, I can relate to that. Yep, I can relate to that. Yep. And it's very interesting. I am on a bit of a journey at the moment of putting boundaries down, because this piece of saying yes to everybody. And then I've been noticing, I've been more and more cognizant of it, of saying yes to everybody, and then thinking, why did I do that? I don't have the capacity, and now I'm really resentful that I've got to do it, but I've committed to doing it, so I'm going to follow through and do it. So that's
and
me.
Boundaries, it seems to come up, and I'm like, boundaries is a whole episode in and of itself. It's a whole course in and of itself. It's a whole entire topic for therapy. Boundaries is so important in assertive communication, but it really tends to be a very common fact. And it's interesting that it's the one thing you bring up. Boundaries are really hard because we're wanting to present as the person that can do it all. And so it's very, very tough. And then when you say no, there's this fear of Did I get judged for that? Was I enough for that person? Did I show up when I needed to? It's a never ending cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very hard. So for anybody listening who's thinking, yes, that's me, and all of those behaviors resonate, but I don't think I'm anxious. How would you know that you have high functioning anxiety versus just being a high achieving person? I'm going to rephrase that. Just be a high achieving person. Let's just be high achieving. That's all we are, just high achieving. Where is the difference? Because I imagine not everybody who achieves well and who is a perfectionist has anxiety.
Fantastic. I love that, because that person actually, and this is where my own opinion, my own spin on this comes in, but fantastic. If you don't think it's affecting your life in a negative way, and it's something that's very manageable, it's not getting in the way of you being able to sleep, proper nutrition, hydration, socializing, working out, if it's not getting in the way of your life and you feel like it's my gosh, please keep feeling that way about it, please, because it's not affecting your life, and that's okay. There are going to be some people that are saying, yeah, it does affect my life. I wake up in the middle of the night and can't shut the thoughts up. I can't go to sleep. I'm going home and eating at the stress. I'm paralyzed in my private life and procrastinate. I multitask and get nothing done. I feel like if it's affecting your life or not. You know it. And if it's not affecting your life, or if it's affecting it so minimally that you wouldn't, oh my goodness, please keep doing what you're doing. It's the person that's saying, yeah, I totally get what she's talking about, that when the door shuts and the room's quiet, it's problematic.
Yes, and this is something I very much relate to. It used to be really difficult for me to go on holiday. And I'm going to, my next question for you is, what are the signs that you might have high functioning anxiety and you're not quite aware of it? And one of that presented for me was this piece of just not wanting to go on holiday because I couldn't switch off, couldn't let go of the work. I'd sort of tipped into a workaholic stage, and then had a massive episode of burnout, which soon put paid to the workaholism and made me do a complete lifestyle overhaul. For anybody listening to this who hopefully hasn't got to the stage of being completely burnt out, because unfortunately that is a big smack in the face from the universe that you need to stop. What might be the small, subtle signs in your own brain physiology, and perhaps also things that other people are saying to you as well, that might indicate that you've got high functioning anxiety?
Yeah. So two things going on here. There's the behavior stuff and then the physical stuff, right? So I'll start with the behavioral stuff. Being a little bit irritable, being a little bit short with people, feeling like, I don't know if this is going to resonate with people, but it's how I feel. If someone asks me to do one more thing, I'm going to lose it. Right? It's constantly being on the brink of, this is too much, right? But also just not loss of interest, but just losing interest in what you're typically passionate about. All of a sudden, hobbies are becoming obligations. All of a sudden, something that you were passionate about for work, you're losing the energy for it. You can see yourself starting to detach from things that once brought you a whole lot of joy. And there's that constant irritation, that constant feeling of being on edge, right? Are early signs of burnout. And when you let it go to the point where you're missing big things, you're not getting big things done, you're letting things fall through the cracks. And then it gets to the point with you where and you don't want to let it get to this point. You'd much rather intervene way before that, but where you're throwing your hands up saying, I am burnt out. I am totally done. And this is going to require more of an intervention than me going for a workout. Right. So, the physical stuff is more headaches, a disruption in sleep patterns, an upset stomach, because interestingly enough, and more research is showing this, a lot of these anxiety hormones live in our gut. And so we feel it in our gut first. And so any kind of upset stomach that won't go away and feeling kind of yuck and nauseous, and can be a real early sign that you're pushing it. So, I think those are early warning signs.
Yes, they are early warning signs. And I think it's time to listen to that. What I hope people get from listening to this is actually just starting to address stuff before. I mean, I think unfortunately we don't address things until we have symptoms of it if we're not aware. And I think high functioning people generally are like, whoa, because people will look at you from, like you've said, from the outside and say, wow, she manages so much stuff so brilliantly. Or look at him, he's got all of this stuff together and he's doing so well. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, not so much. Question for you in terms of starting to treat high functioning anxiety. What are your thoughts on using medication for this type of anxiety?
Yeah, so I subscribe to a way of thinking, and it's not everyone's way of thinking, but it's definitely my opinion on it. You can get a lot of bang for your buck using a combination of medication and therapy, although it can be done without medication. It can be done just through behavioral change. But the way that I like to describe it, medication is not a cure. It's not a fix-all. It's just like if you are to take insulin for diabetes, that is not a cure or a fix-all in the long run. It is simply a tool to get you stabilized in order to start changing your diet, your exercise, your behaviors, your habits to have more success with diabetes, right? Same thing, in my opinion, with anti-anxiety medications, SSRIs, or anything else. They take the edge off. They give you just enough of a break to get in there and start doing the work. Can you anxiety your way through medication? Sure you can. Sure you can. And people report that. People that aren't doing therapy in combination after a while will say, gosh, this pill doesn't seem as effective as it did a year ago. So it's a beautiful tool to give you just enough of a break and just enough space to get in there and start doing work. And with neuroplasticity research that's coming out, I'm so excited about it. It's showing that we actually have the ability at any age to start rewiring our brain and to start forming new connections and to start approaching our lives in a different way. And so medication really does do a nice job of giving you a jump start to that, right? And I'm not pushing that. You can absolutely do it behaviorally too, especially when we're talking about high functioning anxiety. And I'm just talking about that right now, right? There are other disorders that you do need medication, or other disorders that it wouldn't be recommended, right? So, but in this way, it can be used as a real tool, and the combination can be really beautiful.
I think that's such a good point. And the big takeaway I get from what you've just said is medication for high functioning anxiety is about sort of toning down the anxiety that causes the lack of sleep, the gut problems, the on edge, the reactivity, so that you can start to make changes in your life to reduce the things that are happening that cause the anxious behavior and the disruption.
You get to start making the new pathways and everything starts working together.
Yeah. And I had a conversation with a doctor recently who said, using these anxiety meds is great if you're going through a stressful time, you're making some changes, you're feeling anxious about it. Don't make it harder for yourself when they can be used to just help calm the anxiety whilst you do the work. And I think that is the big point here, is you will never change the way you feel by medicating it away when it comes to anxiety. You have to change the way you're doing life that's causing the anxiety. I know for me, you'll enjoy this, Taylor, when I tell you this story. So not only did I have massive burnouts that had me in a heap on the floor crying, I was a complete and utter emotional wreck, I kept working through that because, high functioning, why wouldn't I? Until I was lifting something to put it in my car and I put my back out, and I was hospitalized for 4 days. And I realized at that point, I actually just have got to I can't do this anymore. But it was almost the universe going, listen, we gave you a bit of a signal here. You've totally ignored it. Now we're just going to completely stop you.
Isn't it interesting? If you don't listen to the early warning signs, your body will eventually make you listen.
Your body will make you listen. Absolutely. And I was fortunate with that. It was a huge wake-up call for me. I'm not quite sure what happened to my back. Something went doink, and I was in a huge amount of pain and had to lie down for several days. But luckily there was no disc slipped or any permanent damage, I have to be careful of my back now because it had some damage of some sort. But that could be that I was so aware that could have been something. It could have been a cancer diagnosis. I could have slipped a disc. I could have had to have surgery. I could have struggled to walk. Could have been in chronic pain. That for me was just the biggest wake up call of I cannot do life like this anymore.
Yep. I love that you took it as a wake up call and that you framed it that way and that you learned the lesson from it, because now you are more hyper aware of having some balance. And yes, you can still be high functioning. You can be driven. You can be successful. You can be all the things, but you also need to be good to yourself and mindful of how you're feeling and take a rest when you need a rest. And so I love that you reframed that experience into something that could really help you to be better at managing you moving forward, right? And that's what it's about. I don't think that it's about curing high functioning anxiety or curing anxiety in general or changing the makeup of who you are. I don't think that we do that as humans. You are who you are. It's learning how to work with it in a way that has you feeling like, yes, I can do anything I want to do. I don't have to work myself to burn out. I also don't have to let my dreams go to the wayside because I don't want to be too hard of a worker. You can have it all if what you see as all is a beautiful, delicate balance, right, of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is just such an important conversation to be having about it. So when it comes to, if we take the medication off the table here for now, talking about techniques for what are some manageable techniques that one can implement to start to manage the bad bits of anxiety, the reactivity, the irritability, the not able to sleep, the gut stuff. What are 3 suggestions you have for people to help them with that?
Since I don't know who's listening, I don't know their story, here's what I would say to get started. Things have worked for every human in the past, and things have not worked for humans in the past. And we are all different. What works for me may not work for you. I am an avid runner. I do marathons. I do Ironmans. I like lifting weights. I'm very active. That works for me. That is a surefire way for me to reset myself, recalculate. Other people, running may be the worst thing in the world. It might actually heighten their stress levels and anxiety. Please do not take what works for me and think that it's going to work for you. But what I will say is that every person has, if they really reflect on their life, has things that really work for them and have things that they say, no, that actually made it worse. Go back and start taking inventory of your life. Don't reinvent the wheel completely, because that's just going to create more anxiety, right? Go back, take inventory. Are you better off, less anxiety ridden if you've had 8 hours of sleep, or do you need 9 hours of sleep? Have you ever even noticed how much sleep you need to feel good? When you drink 60 ounces of water, do you feel better than if you drink 5 cups of coffee? Have you ever taken notice of that? Do you feel better when you work out 20 minutes a day every day, or 20 minutes a day 3 days a week? Does yoga do it for you, or does walking do it for you, or does high intensity training do it? Go back and take inventory of your life. What are you doing that works? What are you doing that doesn't work? And start playing with how you can create that balance, right? Back to your example, if it's really hard to say no to something, start small. Can you say, you know what, I don't have time for that today, but I could manage to do that for you at the end of the week. Or I don't have time to do all of that, but I could certainly do a piece of that for you. Start small without a hard no. Give a compromise. Does that make you feel better? Start playing with little things that you can do. And then my biggest thing here is positive self-talk. Pat yourself on the back every single time you can make a change. And I don't care how small it is. I don't care if you managed 3 cups of coffee instead of 4. Take a second to say, my gosh, I did something good for myself today. If you managed to work out for 5 minutes in between clients for me, please take a minute to say, I did that instead of scrolling on my phone for 5 minutes. That was a big deal. The more you talk positively to yourself and start acknowledging everything you're doing right, the more right will come. When you're doing well, I had coffee and I promised myself I wouldn't, instead of I had less coffee than I did yesterday, that's a win. When you start beating yourself up for trying, but it wasn't good enough, now you're back to those perfectionistic tendencies. You're back to the overachieving. And what are you doing? You're back in the anxiety cycle. Reframe how you're talking to yourself. Take inventory, start making the smallest tweaks in the world, and really talk positively to yourself about how hard you're trying, because it's not going to be perfect and every day is going to be different. You're just doing your best for today, and your best today may not look like yesterday, and it won't look like tomorrow.
Yeah, what great advice in there. And it's interesting you say about positive self-talk, and that's been something I've really been working on a lot. And as somebody who is generally quite a perfectionist, I'm quite hard on myself. And I get frustrated if I can't get something right immediately. As I've got older, I've got better with that. And I think the more self-development work I've done, the better I've got at being patient with myself. I've decided to learn to free dive. Long story why I'm doing that. I'll cover that in a solo episode at some point. And the funny thing with free diving is you have to relax. And that's like completely novel for me. I've been meditating for a while, so I relax a bit in the morning before I unrelax while I go and do stuff. But this whole free diving, you have to hold your breath underwater, which is kind of putting you in tension. But you have to, in order to be able to hold your breath for longer, you have to just let go of all of the tension everywhere else. It's been so good for me. And I did the first pool session. And in order to qualify in the pool, you have to do a 90-second static apnea, which was impossible the first time I tried it. And you have to swim 25 meters on one breath underwater. Also, two things that were for me completely outrageous and unachievable when I did my first pool session. And I heard the chatter start with, oh, you're not very good at this. And I was actually able to say to myself, hang on a minute, not done this, not practice any of the breathing techniques. I got techniques from the instructor. He said, you can come back as many times as you want. I went away, I practiced for a week, and I just gradually built up with the breath holding at home. Lo and behold, I go into the pool next time. I did 100 seconds static apnea, and I managed to do 2 lengths of the pool twice, just for good measure. And it was such a confidence boost for me to have been able to be gentle with myself, allow myself to not get it right the first time, know that if I practiced, it would be doable, because I'm not that magic and special that I can't hold my breath for that long when lots of other people can. And it has been such an important exercise for me, with this whole piece of letting go, being gentle, and patiently and persistently just practicing.
I love this example, and the therapist in me wants to praise you, but also wants to give the lesson in this. 2 big things came out of this for you. No one is the exception to the rule, and it's actually a really good thing. Your mindset is what sets you apart most of the time between what you can do and what you can't do. The minute that you gave yourself permission to practice, not be perfect at first, and you started working with yourself instead of working against yourself in your self-talk, was the minute that you were able to overcome that hurdle. And I tell you, it's the biggest thing about running a marathon. Your body can run the marathon if you've trained properly. It is your mind that you've got to play with. That's the first thing. Free diving and marathon running, and I can relate, even though I'm not a free diver, I can relate. They both force you, and this is the second lesson in this, to be very present. You cannot possibly have anxiety if you are fully present in a moment. And the free diving forces you to be fully present in that moment. You must focus on relaxing. You must focus on what you're doing, and you cannot let your mind wander, or otherwise you're not going to make it through it is the same thing with running. If I let my mind wander to, oh my gosh, I still have X amount of miles left. Oh my gosh, my legs are hurting. Oh my gosh, what if I don't finish? Oh my gosh, what if you will quit? You have to be fully present in a moment. And when you are fully present in the moment, it is one of the best things you can do for helping yourself to manage high functioning anxiety symptoms.
Yes. How wonderful. What wonderful examples. And I think the thing that I've also got from it, it's been great training. It's very uncomfortable holding your breath, especially with your face underwater, and you start to think, don't like this, feeling like I'm going to panic. And to just quietly say, they're just sensations, which is what a lot of, and it's very, again, we're coming back to this point of just sensations, but they're just feelings. And actually, if you're able to look at them and say, it's a feeling I'm experiencing, and just start to actually sit with it like that, it becomes less overwhelming, because it's just a feeling, and it'll pass.
No feeling is good, bad, right, or wrong. There is no value judgment on a feeling until we use our minds to place a value judgment on a feeling. And that is what creates a good or a bad or a right or a wrong feeling. Yeah. And so you're right about that. If you just acknowledge that it is a feeling, just like every other feeling, and you let it play out, you're right about that. You're also present. You're not judging it. You're there for it.
Yeah. And it comes back to the point, the really important point you made about being gentle with yourself and being kind to yourself. And that's, if we can start to do that, life unfolds a little bit better. And I think especially with high functioning anxiety, and to the point about perfectionism, if you allow it, it will just drive you to, drive yourself into the ground. And sometimes you have to go, actually, I don't want to do this. I can't do this. This doesn't feel good for me. That's okay.
And as far as perfectionism, for everyone listening that does really resonate with this conversation, and 90% is still an A. 90% is still an A. And to give yourself that 10% of wiggle room, just do it to your standards 90% of the time in all areas. You can't imagine the amount of grace that you end up giving yourself in that 10%, the amount of space you free up, the amount of self-compassion you have in that 10%. And I've got news: at the end of the day, you've still got an A. You have still got an A. It's okay. It's okay. No one has ever asked me about my A's on my transcripts if they were 90.1s or 99.9s. No one cares.
No, and I think it's about reframing that perfectionist mindset too. I got 90% rather than I missed out on 10%.
That's exactly right. So the reframe is so powerful. Yeah.
Taylor, this has been an amazing conversation. I would like to know a little bit more about the online courses you are offering. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so of all the things that I could have done an online course about, especially specializing in high functioning anxiety, I chose stress emotional bored eating. And the reason that I chose that is because oftentimes people that have high functioning anxiety symptoms will eat to comfort themselves in quiet moments. So we're talking about those coping skills, and sometimes eating is a coping skill. Once we're done eating, the feelings of self-doubt, no self-worth, the guilt, the shame come with it. And so I'm very passionate about that, because that's something that's very close to my heart as a coping mechanism in the past for me. And so anyway, the course is to help people have a new relationship with food. But in that is all the things that we discussed: how to have replacement skills, how to reframe your thoughts, how to have self-compassion, how to reward yourself when you've made small progress. It does the taking inventory, what works in your life, what doesn't work in your life. And so I wrapped all of these skills, all of this knowledge that I have into lessons. And yes, it's very tailored to emotional eating, but yeah, it's all of what we talked about, and it's just in that avenue. So amazing.
Thank you. And for folks listening, Taylor has very generously given a discount code, which is Emma15. So that'll be EMMA15, that you can apply at checkout.
I've got the one course, and it comes with all kinds of bonuses. Read through it on the website. And then I've got a recipe book, and the recipe book has recipes that are all geared towards reducing stress. And so it can help you it was designed by a nutritionist. And so it's more to help alleviate lower stress levels, help to lower the hormones in your gut, and to kind of reset.
Brilliant. where can we find those online, Taylor?
Yes, go to my website, www.taylordurrett.com. And in there, there are all the ways to connect with me. You can go to the course, you can find me on Instagram, you can message me for coaching or counseling if you live in Colorado or Florida. So yes, you can find all the ways to connect with me on my website.
Amazing. Thank you. We'll share all of that in the show notes along with the discount code. That's going to be valid until the end of this year. So folks, please go and check out Taylor's courses and the recipe book. That sounds really great. I'm going to go and have a look at that as well. And thank you for being such a fabulous guest. And thank you for this really lively and inspiring conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening, folks. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, please share with your friends and be sure to leave me a 5-star rating and review, especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. To find out more about my one-on-one coaching, please visit my website, which is emmaobriencoach.com. And remember, folks, when life gives you lemons, you can always choose another fruit. See you next time.